Okay, so today we are going to cover section 4 and its equations of lines. So again, same thing that we saw on Friday, slope-intercept form, point-slope form, and standard form. Remember when we're talking about slope-intercept form, the m in the equation represents the slope of the line. The b represents the y-intercept, or where our line is hitting the y-axis. Then when you have an equation in point-slope form, what's going to be inputted into this form is an ordered pair, x1, y1, and then the slope again. So the m always represents the slope. The x and the y are going to stay as variables. Then the other form that we talked about was standard form. Remember, for standard form, you cannot have any fractions, and then the number in front of x, your a term, must be positive. So a, b, and c are just going to be integers, but a has to be a positive integer. The other formula we talked about on Friday was the slope formula, and we're going to use that today. So just to review that, the slope formula again, m represents slope, and that formula is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1, where x1, y1 is the first order pair, and x2, y2 is the second order pair. So we're going to use these three forms today in the lesson, and we're just going to be transforming things. So our first example is asking us to write an equation of a line through the order pair -4, 1 with a slope of -3. So notice I went ahead and I labeled that the slope meant m and that the order pair -4, 1 is your x1, y1. Now, notice that the instructions here do not specify which form to leave your answer in. So I'm going to demonstrate all three forms of how I can take these two pieces of information and transform an equation into standard form, slope-intercept form, and into point-slope. And that's what I'm going to start with. Now, the point-slope form of a linear equation, this form is going to be very important to you. I highly recommend that you memorize it and become comfortable with using it. You will use it in pre-calculus, you will use it in calculus. You might even see something on the SAT where maybe they're asking you to compare, three lines and try to determine maybe if they're parallel, perpendicular, things like that. And it would definitely help you if you could find the slope of the line quickly. So for this one, I'm going to start out by using point slope. I'm going to replace the three pieces of information that are given to me: the y1, the m, and the x1. Remember, the y and the x that don't have the little subscript are going to stay as variables. So I'm going to replace, and let's see, let me color code this. So I'm going to replace the m right here with the -3. And then I'm going to replace my x1, and in its place I'm putting -4. And in the y1, I'm going to put the 1. So y minus, and then my y1, it's the yellow one. And then I'm going to put equals, then the slope in blue, and then I'll put the x minus. Now notice my x1 is actually a negative number, so remember that part of your formula is a subtraction sign. So notice when we do this, this negative is actually going to become a +4 there. So y minus 1, -3, x plus 4. Now, if your instruction said to use that order pair and that slope and leave it in point slope form, we would stop right here. However, chances are they're going to ask for slope-intercept or standard form. So we're going to keep going. Yes?
Are we asking for those two, or can we?
From this point, to get it either into slope-intercept or standard form, I need to distribute. So I'm going to distribute the -3 to the x and to the 4. And then if it asks for slope-intercept form, I would just add the 1 and get y equals -3x minus 11. And this is now slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. Now, if it asks for standard form, remember standard form is ax plus by equals c. So to get it into that form, I would have to add the 3x because I need my x and y on one side and my constant on the other. So standard form, given that those two pieces of information, would be this. And the reason why I move the x over is because my a term needed to be positive. So this is how I can take a slope and one order pair and come up with 3 different forms of my line or my linear equation. Yes. Another option is if your x is negative, just divide everything or multiply everything by a -1. So that is an option. Absolutely. Let's try the next example. This time, given 2 order pairs. Again, in order to do this, we need the slope. So this is where we're going to have to use the slope formula in order to put it into point slope. Okay, so we're going to find the slope of the line, so we're going to use the slope formula. Again, remember the slope formula, slope represents m, so y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Now, again, it doesn't matter what you label which order pair is which. So if I decide to say that this one's going to be my order pair number 1, and this is order pair number 2, I'm going to get the same answer even if I called the -3 2, x2, y2. It doesn't matter. So, but I'll do it this way. So I'm going to plug it in, and I get -4 minus 2 over 2 minus -3. The numerator gives me -6, and the denominator gives me +5. This is the slope I'm going to use in my point slope formula. So again, I'm going to use one of the order pairs. It doesn't matter which. So I'll go ahead and use this one because this is what I called x1, y1. And then again, we're going to use the slope that we just calculated. So again, I'm going to rewrite the point slope formula just so I have a little visual here. So y minus y1, m, x minus x1. Again, I'm going to replace those 3 pieces of information. So the y and the x are going to stay. So y minus 2 equals -6 over 5, x minus -3. Again, notice that negative is going to make it become a +3. You can either distribute the -6/5 and work with it as a fraction, but again, I don't like to work with the fraction. I'm going to multiply by the common denominator, which is 5, and clear my fraction. So this will now become 5y minus 10 is equal to -6. And again, when there's a parentheses there and I'm going to be distributing something in there, I don't multiply the 5 to what's in the parentheses. So then now I will distribute the -6. And now at this point, depending on what the question has asked you, what form to leave it in, we're either going to put it into standard form or slope-intercept form from this point. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to rewrite this over here, and I'm going to show you transforming both ways. So if the instruction said to leave it in standard form, so standard form I'm going to do on the left. So I would add the 6x and get 6x plus 5y minus 10 equals 18, negative 18, and then I will add the 10 and get 6x plus 5y equals negative 8. This would be standard form. Now, if it said slope-intercept form, then instead I would add the 10 first, and now get 5y equals negative 6x minus 8, and then divide everything by 5. Because remember, slope-intercept form can have fractions. However, standard form cannot. So if it said to leave it in slope-intercept, this would be what it would look like. However, if it said standard form, then it would be that one. Be able to give your answer in all three forms. Let's try another example. Yes? Okay. So let's say we didn't get rid of the fraction. So let's say up at this point where it was y minus 2 and it was negative 6 over 5 x plus 3. So let's say we didn't clear the fraction. So let's distribute. Y minus 2 equals negative 6 over 5x minus 18 over 5. To isolate x, I need to add 2. So now, because I didn't clear the fraction, I have to add 2 to this fraction, so I need to find a common denominator. So my common denominator is going to be 5. So then I would get I would turn the 2 into 10 over 5. And then I'd have to add it with the negative 18 over 5, and I still get negative 8 over 5. Okay? So you're still going to get the same answer, especially if you're going to put it in slope-intercept form. You're going to have to find a common denominator at some point anyways. And then standard form, you can't have fractions, so you'd have to clear it anyways. So sometimes it's easier to multiply by the common denominator first. But again, if you're comfortable with working with fractions like this, you can do it. You will still get the exact same answer. So let's try the next example. This time, we're talking slope-intercept form. However, I'm going to put it in standard form too, just for extra practice. Now, when they give you the slope, already calculated, and the y-intercept already figured out for you, remember the y-intercept is your b, and the slope is your m. So all you need to do is take out the letter m and take out the letter b. And then that would be already in slope-intercept form for you. So y equals negative 4 over 5x minus 2. That would be slope-intercept form. Now, let's say they gave you this information, but then they said, after you put it in slope-intercept form, now put it in standard form. So again, remember, standard form is ax plus by equals c. No fractions though. And the number in front of x has to be positive. So the first thing I'm going to do is clear my fraction. I'm going to multiply everything by 5. So I get 5y equals negative 4x minus 10. And then again, move the x over. And now I have standard form. 4x plus 5y equals negative 10. And now we have standard form. So again, make sure you read the directions on the form it's asking you to leave it in. It says to find an equation of the line. And again, they're giving us the slope and they're giving us the y-intercept. But this time the instruction said standard form. But again, because I have a slope and a y-intercept, I'm going to put it in slope-intercept first, and then I'll rearrange it into standard. So again, remember, slope-intercept is y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to put in the slope, -2/5, and then put in the b. And now this is slope-intercept, but if it says put it in standard form, which is what it said to do, I need to clear my fraction and also make my a term positive. So I'm going to first clear my fraction by multiplying everything by 5. So 5y equals -2x plus 15. And now to get it in standard form, add the 2x to the left. So 2x plus 5y equals 15. And now it's in standard form. All right, and then those wonderful proofs in geometry with parallel lines.
Yeah.
Okay, so remember that parallel lines have the same slope. So as long as you can get an equation in one of the forms and figure out what the slope is, if it's the same number in front of x after it's in either slope-intercept or point slope, then you know that your lines are parallel. Notice if you were given a graph, remember parallel lines never touch. They run side by side, and they're going to rise and run at the same rate because their slope is the same. Now, for perpendicular lines, and also remember if you ever see the abbreviation, on two lines, they would have two arrows indicating that they're parallel. Also know that the symbol for parallel is two straight lines. It looks like two ones or two lowercase l's. For perpendicular, it's an upside down T. So for perpendicular lines, their slopes have negative reciprocal slopes, or you might also see it as opposite reciprocal slopes, meaning one will be positive, one will be negative, and they will be reciprocal, so fractions flipped upside down. Remember, perpendicular lines, when they intersect, they form right angles. So these are the characteristics of parallel and perpendicular. Also remember that when you have a horizontal line and a vertical line, when they intersect, they form perpendicular lines. So when you have a line that has a slope of 0 and a line that has an undefined slope, know together they're perpendicular. They form perpendicular lines. So let's go ahead and try and work with this information that we just learned. And it's asking us to find an equation of a line through this ordered pair, 3, 5. So this is going to be my x1, y1. But it wants us to make sure that our line is parallel to this one. Notice this equation is in standard form. At quick glance at it, I can't tell what the slope is until I rearrange it. And in order to form an equation, I need a slope of a line. So the first thing I'm going to do is rearrange this standard form into slope-intercept form so I can find the slope that I need to use. So I'm going to subtract the 2. And then divide by 5. This will give me the slope that I need to use because it asked me for a line that was parallel, and I know that parallel lines have equal slopes or the same slope. So now that I know the slope I'm going to use and my x1, y1, Now I can plug it into my point slope form. So I'm going to use y minus y1 equals m, and then x minus x1. I'm going to put in the 3 pieces of information again. So I'm going to put in the ordered pair, which will be y minus 5 equals negative 2 over 5, x minus 3. Now, if it said to leave it in point slope form, we would be finished. However, if it asks for slope intercept or standard form, we've got to keep going. So the first thing I'm going to do is clear my fraction. I'm going to multiply everything by 5. 5y minus 25 equals negative 2 times x minus 3. Again, do not multiply the x and the 3 that are in parentheses, just the fraction that's outside. Now I'm going to distribute so I can get it into slope intercept or standard form. So now at this point, you can either go ahead and work with it into standard form or slope intercept form. So if I ask for standard form, I would add the 2x. By adding it, it makes it become positive. That's one of the stipulations for standard form. And then I would add the 25 and get 2x plus 5y equals 31. So if the question said to take that information and write standard form, that would be your process. If it said slope intercept, then I could either just I could take it from this point and then move the x over and then divide by 5. Be able to work with these equations and solve for anything that it's asking you. Divide by 5, divide by 5, y equals negative 2 over 5x plus 31 over 5. So if it asks for slope intercept form, that's what we would do. Now, remember, if you're ever taking a standardized test, and if it asks you for a line parallel to something, try to eliminate choices that don't have the same slope. Remember, parallel lines have the same slope. So take in a point and another equation to come up with an equation that's in either slope intercept form or standard form. This is your process. So again, remember, for perpendicular, we need opposite reciprocals or negative reciprocals. So the first thing I'm going to do is rearrange my equation. So the 2x plus 5y equals 4. Subtract 2x. 5y equals negative 2x plus 4. Divide everything by 5. And y equals negative 2/5 x plus 4/5. Now, if it asks for a parallel, I would use that number. But the question asks for perpendicular. So I need to now flip this to the reciprocal and make it opposite sign. So notice how it was negative. Negative reciprocal or opposite reciprocal means to make it opposite of what it started out as. So it started as negative, I make it positive, and flip the fraction upside down. And now I will use the ordered pair, the 3, 5, and this is x1, y1. So point slope again. So y minus 5, 5 over 2, x minus 3. At this point, I'm going to clear the fraction. So I'm going to multiply everything by 2. So this becomes 2y minus 10 is equal to 5, parenthesis, x minus 3. I now need to distribute the 5. And now, first thing I'm going to do is put it in standard form. Now, if I move the 5x to the left, it'll become negative. And then I'm going to have to multiply my equation by -1 or divide by -1 to make it positive. So instead, I'm going to move the y over. It doesn't really matter which side you move it to. So I'm going to move it over so my x stays positive. Then I'll move the 15 away from the x and the y. And then I get 5 is equal to 5x minus 2y. And then I can just flip it around and write the 5x on the left and then put the 5 on the right. This would be standard form. I'm now going to rearrange it into slope-intercept form. So if they said standard, this is what you would do. Let me fix it up so it's in slope-intercept now. -2y, -5x plus 5. Divide everything by -2. And I get y is equal to positive, because a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and then minus 5 over 2. So be able to go from any one of those 3 forms. The next thing we're going to talk about before we finish up is horizontal and vertical lines. We talked about this on Friday, and we're just going to quick review. So remember, a horizontal line, if you have your graph, looks like the horizon. So for this one, whenever you're given an order pair, horizontal line is going to be a line through the y-axis at your y-coordinate. So it would be a horizontal line through the 5 if it were this equation. When it's a vertical line, this would be up and down. Back to the horizontal. Horizontal lines have a slope of 0. I told you guys to memorize this on Friday. Then the vertical lines have a slope that is undefined. And I told everybody on Friday that you could think of these first 3 letters as up and down. U-N-D, up and down. So then this one, if I were to graph it, would be the vertical line through the 2. So going through the x-axis at 2. And that would have an undefined slope. So that would be the x of the order pair. It's x equals when it's vertical. And for the horizontal, it's the y equals the y of the order pair. So be able to do this. The next slide just has a summary of the different forms in the horizontal and vertical lines that we've spoken about. So again, and it tells you what each thing represents in the equation or in the form. So, and again, your homework is that 236 to 237. Again, this time I did put a PDF. However, do not try to cram all your work in there, especially for the graphs. Add graphs to the bottom of it on the questions where it asks you to graph.